My daughter-in-law called the police on me at my own grandson's 7th birthday party, pointing her manicured finger at me across the marble foyer and announcing to 2 uniformed officers that I was trespassing in a house she claimed was hers. My son Marcus stood behind her with his arms crossed, silent, watching the woman who carried him for 9 months and raised him alone for 22 years be escorted down the front steps of a Denver mansion that I, Helen Ashford, had personally purchased in cash 11 years earlier. What neither of them realized as I walked calmly to my car with my grandson, Ethan's unopened birthday gift still in my hands, was that within 48 hours, they would be the ones frantically packing cardboard boxes, begging their friends for couches to sleep on, and leaving 29 voicemails on my phone that I would never, ever return. My name is Helen Ashford. I am 70 years old. My late husband Charles left me a trust, worth more than most people in this country will earn in 3 lifetimes. But the real inheritance he left me was simpler and sharper than any sum of money. He left me a spine, and a tea. That cold Saturday afternoon in Cherry Creek, I was about to use it. Let me go back to the beginning, because the beginning is what makes the ending matter. I met Charles when I was 24, working as a junior paralegal at a law firm in downtown Denver. He was 31, already building his real estate empire. And the first time he walked into that office, I told my supervisor he was arrogant. 3 months later, I married him. Charles used to laugh about that for the rest of his life. He said I was the only woman who ever called him arrogant to his face and the only one he ever trusted completely. We were married for 38 years before the pancreatic cancer took him in 11 weeks. 11 weeks. That is all the warning I got after nearly 4 decades of breakfast together. We had one son, Marcus. He was our miracle, born after 4 miscarriages. And I loved him the way only a mother who has buried hope 4 times can love a living child. I loved him too much. Probably. Charles warned me. Charles used to say, "Helen, honey, you are raising a prince, not a man." I did not listen. When Charles passed in 2018, Marcus was already married to Vanessa Prescott, a woman I met exactly twice before the wedding, and whose mother once told me at the rehearsal dinner that my pearls were charmingly outdated. I smiled. I said nothing. Charles squeezed my hand under the table. After Charles died, I made a decision that I now understand was the greatest mistake of my adult life. Marcus and Vanessa had just had my grandson, Ethan. They were living in a cramped townhouse in Aurora, and Vanessa kept dropping hints at family dinners about how the baby deserved a real yard. So I bought them a house. Not any house. A 7-bedroom stone mansion in Cherry Creek with a circular driveway and a library that Charles would have loved. I paid $3.4 million in cash. I did not transfer the deed. I told Marcus quite clearly that the house remained in my name and that he and his family were welcome to live there as long as they were part of my life. He hugged me and cried and called me the best mother in the world. Vanessa kissed my cheek. Her lipstick left a mark I wiped off in the car. For 11 years, I paid the property taxes. I paid for the landscaping. I paid for the new roof in 2021 and the kitchen renovation in 2023 that Vanessa insisted upon because, in her words, the original Carrara marble was a little too 2010. I funded Ethan's private preschool, his enrollment at Grayland Country Day, his swim lessons, his cello tutor, and the trust that I opened in his name, the week he was born, into which I had already deposited $600,000 by the time he turned 7. And slowly, over those 11 years, I became a stranger in my own son's house. It started small. Vanessa would call to tell me that Ethan had a cold on the Sunday we had planned to have lunch, but I would later see pictures on her Instagram of him at the zoo with her mother that same afternoon. I would drop off a birthday gift and find a note on the door saying they had gone to Vail for the weekend. When I hosted Thanksgiving at my condo the first year after Charles died, only Marcus came, and he left after dessert because Vanessa had a migraine. By the 3rd year, even Marcus stopped coming. I spent Thanksgiving alone in 2022, eating a Cornish hen I had roasted for myself, watching a woman on television talk about gratitude. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself Vanessa was just busy, just stressed, just a young mother. I told myself this for 11 years, because the alternative was admitting that my son had chosen a woman who was quietly, methodically, surgically removing me from my grandson's life. Then came Ethan's 7th birthday. Ethan is the one good thing. I need you to understand that. My grandson is a bright, curious, tender little boy who writes me letters in his careful block handwriting and who, every time he sees me, runs to me with his arms wide open, like I am the whole sky. He calls me Grammy. When he was 4, he told me I smelled like cookies and sundae. I keep that sentence inside my chest like a locket. I had been planning his 7th birthday gift for 3 months. He had become obsessed with astronomy, so I bought him a professional-grade Celestron telescope, the kind used by amateur astronomers at the Chamberlain Observatory, along with a handwritten certificate promising him a weekend trip, just the two of us, to the Dark Sky Preserve in Westcliff that summer. The telescope alone was worth more than some people's cars. That was not the point. The point was that Ethan had told me, the last time I was allowed to see him, that he wanted to find Saturn's rings with his own eyes. The invitation to the party came by text message. Not a call. Not a proper invitation. Not even an email. A text from Vanessa, 3 days before the event, telling me the party was at the house from 2 to 5 in the afternoon, and could I please not bring anything too extravagant because she had a specific aesthetic planned. I replied politely that I would be there at 2. I did not mention the telescope. I arrived at 1:50. I always arrived early. Charles had raised me that way. I drove my dark green Range Rover up the long driveway of the house I owned, but no longer felt welcome in, and I sat for a moment in the car, looking at the stone facade, the boxwoods I had paid a landscape architect $12,000 to design, the front door that Charles and I had picked out at a reclamation yard in Pennsylvania in 2014. Then I took a breath, got out of the car, and carried my grandson's telescope up the steps. Vanessa's mother, Cordelia, opened the door. Cordelia is 62 and has had so much work done on her face that she smiles with the patience of a woman who cannot feel her own lips. She did not smile when she saw me. "Helen," she said. "Oh, you're early." "I'm on time," I said. She did not move aside. She stood in the doorway of my house and looked at the large box in my arms. "Vanessa mentioned not to bring anything big," she said. "The decor, you know. It's quite specific." "It's a telescope," I said. "For Ethan." She sighed, as if I had brought a dead animal, and finally stepped aside. I walked into my own foyer, the marble floor I had chosen, the chandelier Charles and I had bought at an estate sale in Charleston, the console table that had belonged to my mother. A house full of my things, my taste, my money, my memory, and not one single thing that felt like mine anymore. The party was already in full swing. 40 or 50 children were running through the downstairs rooms. There were adults in cashmere holding champagne flutes. Vanessa had hired a balloon artist, a face painter, and a woman dressed as an astronaut who was apparently leading the children in some sort of space-themed scavenger hunt. I recognized none of the adults, not one. These were Vanessa's friends, Vanessa's world, and I, the woman whose signature was on the deed of the house they were standing in, was a stranger at my own grandson's birthday party. I spotted Ethan near the back terrace, his face painted like a blue alien, laughing with another little boy. My heart lifted. I began to walk toward him. And then Vanessa cut me off. She came gliding across the living room in a cream silk dress, her blonde hair pulled into a severe knot. And she smiled at me with the kind of smile reserved for solicitors and Jehovah's Witnesses. "Helen," she said, taking the telescope box out of my hands before I could protest. "You're here. Wonderful. Listen, I need to talk to you for just a second. Let's step into the library." I followed her. I was still holding out hope. I am ashamed of that now, 70 years old and still hoping, with every step down the hallway, that my daughter-in-law was going to surprise me with something kind. Marcus was in the library, waiting. My son would not look at me. He was standing by the window with his hands in his pockets, staring at the snow on the lawn. Vanessa closed the door. "Helen," she said, "this has been coming for a long time, and I think today, with Ethan's birthday, it's time to just be honest with each other." "Honest about what?" I asked. "We don't want you here. I want to describe, precisely, what those 5 words did to my body." My knees did not give out. My breath did not catch. Instead, a strange, cold calm moved down my spine, vertebra by vertebra, and I understood in that moment that I had been waiting to hear this sentence for 11 years, and the only thing shocking about it was how relieved I felt that it was finally being said out loud. "Marcus," I said, "is this how you feel?" My son did not turn around. He kept looking at the snow. "Mom," he said, "Vanessa and I have talked about this. Ethan is getting older. He needs a stable environment. The dynamic with you is—" He stopped. He could not finish the sentence. "The dynamic with me is what, Marcus?" I said. "Finish your sentence." "It's confusing for him," Vanessa said, stepping in smoothly. "He has a grandmother already. My mother. She's here every day. She's part of his daily life. And then you swoop in with these extravagant gifts and these weekend trips, and it undermines the family structure we're trying to build. So we've decided that, going forward, you'll see Ethan on the major holidays, supervised, and that the house, which has always been a source of tension, needs to legally transition to us so that we can feel settled." I looked at her for a long moment. "Say that last part again, Vanessa." She lifted her chin. "The house. It's time for Marcus and me to have it in our name. We've been the ones living here, raising our child here, paying for the maintenance. I pay for the maintenance. The emotional maintenance," she snapped, "the day-to-day life of a home, and we think it's only fair, after 11 years, that the deed reflect reality." I turned to Marcus. "Son," he finally looked at me. His eyes were wet, but he did not come toward me. "Mom, please don't make a scene. Not today. For Ethan." And that, more than anything that had been said, was the moment something inside me went very, very quiet. "I will not make a scene," I said. "I would like to give my grandson his birthday gift, spend 10 minutes with him, and then I will leave." "That's not going to work," Vanessa said. "We need you to leave now. Before he sees you." "We told him Grammy couldn't make it." I stared at her. "You told him I couldn't make it, for his sake," she said. I looked down at the telescope box on the floor between us. I looked at the closed door. I looked at my son, standing by the window like a boy who had been caught doing something he knew was unforgivable and had decided, instead of facing it, to just keep his back turned. I picked up the telescope. I walked to the door, and then Vanessa said the sentence that changed everything. "If you refuse to leave, Helen, I will call the police. You are not welcome in this house. I will say you are trespassing." I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. "Vanessa," I said quietly, "do you know whose name is on the deed of this house?" She laughed, a short, sharp, confident laugh. "Please," she said. "After 11 years, any lawyer in Colorado will say this is our primary residence. Possession is 9/10 of the law. I've already spoken to an attorney. So yes, Helen, I will call the police. Don't test me." I looked at my son. "Marcus, is this what you want?" He did not answer. "Marcus, look at me. Is this what you want?" "I just want peace, Mom." I nodded once. I opened the library door. I walked down the hallway, through the foyer full of strangers, past Cordelia, who was pretending to arrange napkins, and I stopped at the front door because I heard a small voice behind me. "Grammy?" I turned around. Ethan was standing at the edge of the living room, his face paint half melting, holding a paper cup of juice. He looked at me with the open, uncomplicated love of a 7-year-old child who has just been told his grandmother was not coming and then sees her walking out the door. "Grammy, why are you leaving?" I knelt down on the marble floor of the foyer that I had paid for, and I opened my arms. He ran to me. I held him. I smelled his hair. I whispered in his ear, "Sweetheart, Grammy has to go. But I left you a telescope. It's in the library. When you use it, I want you to look at Saturn's rings, and you remember that Grammy saw them with you, even when she wasn't there. Do you understand?" He nodded into my shoulder. "I love you, Ethan. More than all the stars you're about to see." I stood up. I did not cry. I walked out my own front door. I got into my Range Rover, and I drove down the driveway, and I did not look back. Because there was nothing behind me that belonged to me anymore, except work that needed to be done. I did not go home. I drove straight to my attorney's house. Gerald Winthrop has been my lawyer for 26 years. He answered the door in a golf sweater, took one look at my face and said, "Helen, come in. What do you need?" I sat at his kitchen table. I accepted a cup of coffee. I told him, in order, calmly, everything that had happened. When I was finished, Gerald set down his pen and looked at me. "Helen, how much of this do you want to undo?" "All of it, Gerald. All of it? All of it." He nodded slowly. "Let me explain what you own. You own that house free and clear. You own the trust you established for Ethan. And you are the sole trustee with full discretionary authority over disbursement. You are the guarantor on Marcus and Vanessa's line of credit at Bank of Colorado, which is approximately $280,000 currently drawn. You are the primary on the Grayland Country Day tuition contract for Ethan. You are the co-signer on the lease for Marcus's Porsche. And you are the named benefactor in the Prescott Family Foundation, which Vanessa's mother chairs and which depends on your annual contribution of $100,000. Do you want me to continue? Please. You are also the landlord of the commercial building in Lodo, where Marcus's marketing agency rents office space at a below-market rate that you personally negotiated. I had forgotten about that last one. Gerald, I said, I want you to call every single one of those institutions on Monday morning. I want the line of credit called in. I want the Porsche lease terminated. I want the tuition contract canceled, effective end of this semester. I want the foundation contribution withdrawn. I want a 30-day notice to vacate served on Marcus's agency for the Lodo space. And I want a formal notice, delivered by a process server, giving Marcus and Vanessa 30 days to vacate the Cherry Creek house. Gerald looked at me for a long time. Helen, you understand what you are doing. I do. What about Ethan? That was the hardest question. I thought about it for a long moment. Ethan's trust stays. I will not punish a child for what his parents have done. But the trust has a stipulation now. I want you to draft it. The principal cannot be accessed by his parents under any circumstances. The trust disperses to him on his 21st birthday, and a portion pays directly to his educational institutions on a semester basis, bypassing his parents entirely. If Marcus or Vanessa attempts to challenge the trust, they forfeit any residual beneficiary status. Am I clear? Crystal and Gerald. One more thing. I want Ethan's access to me legally protected. Draft a grandparent visitation petition. Colorado allows it under specific circumstances, and I believe what happened today qualifies. I will not let that woman decide when I see my grandson. Gerald wrote for a long time. Then he looked up. Monday morning. It will all happen Monday morning. I drove home. I sat in my kitchen. I made myself a sandwich. I did not cry. I was not ready to cry yet. Monday morning came. At 9:04 a.m., the Bank of Colorado called in the line of credit, $280,000, due within 72 hours. At 9:37 a.m., Marcus's Porsche lease was terminated, and a recovery truck was dispatched to the Cherry Creek address. At 10:15 a.m., Grayland Country Day received formal written notice that Ethan's tuition sponsorship was being transferred to a direct disbursement trust arrangement, effective immediately, and that Marcus and Vanessa Ashford were no longer authorized signatories on his educational account. At 10:52 a.m., the Prescott Family Foundation's annual pledge letter was rescinded, and Gerald sent a copy directly to Cordelia's personal email. At 11:30 a.m., a process server knocked on the front door of the Cherry Creek mansion and handed Vanessa a 30-day notice to vacate. At 11:41 a.m., my phone began to ring. I watched it ring. I did not answer. By noon, I had 14 missed calls from Marcus, 6 from Vanessa, and 3 from an unknown number I later learned was Cordelia. By the end of the day, the count was 29. Voicemails ranged from furious to pleading to threatening to sobbing. Vanessa left one that called me a vindictive, classless old woman. Marcus left one at 8:17 p.m. that was just the sound of him breathing. And then, very quietly, "Mom, please, I did not return any of them. On Tuesday, Gerald filed the grandparent visitation petition in Denver County Court. On Wednesday, Marcus's marketing agency received the 30-day notice on the Lodo office space. On Thursday, a reporter from the Denver Post called me to confirm a tip that Vanessa Prescott Ashford's social media had gone suddenly private and that the Prescott Family Foundation was restructuring. I declined to comment. On Friday, my son showed up at my condo. I almost did not let him in. But I did, because he was still my son, and because I wanted to see his face in person when I said what I needed to say. He had lost weight in 6 days. He sat on my couch. He could not meet my eyes. "Mom," he said, "please. The house. The credit line. Vanessa's mother. Ethan's school. You're destroying us." "I am correcting a ledger," I said. "That is not the same thing. Mom, I'm begging you." "Marcus, do you remember what you said to me in that library?" He was quiet. "You said you wanted peace. I am giving you peace. The peace of a life that is actually yours. You have never had one. You have had mine, dressed up as yours. For 11 years, you have lived in my house, driven my cars, sent your son to my schools, eaten from my table, and allowed your wife to treat me like a nuisance. You wanted a life without me in it. You have one now. I suggest you learn what it costs. Mom, please, we have nowhere to go. You have 24 more days. Use them. Ethan will see me." Gerald filed a petition on Tuesday. "I will see my grandson with or without your permission. That part is not yours to decide anymore." He started to cry, really cry, the way he cried when he was 8, and broke his arm falling out of the oak tree in our backyard. I did not move. I loved him. God help me. I loved him more in that moment than I had loved him in a decade, because for the first time since he was a boy, he was actually present in the room with me, stripped of his wife, his pride, his inheritance, his assumed future. Just Marcus. "My son, I need you to hear me," I said. "I am not finished loving you. I am finished financing you. There is a difference, and you have never been taught it, and that is my fault. I let your father and I spoil you. I let that woman convince you that I was optional. I am not optional. I am your mother. I will be your mother until the day I die. But I will not be your bank, your landlord, your social sponsor, and your household staff. Do you understand me?" He nodded. "Go home, Marcus. Pack. Find an apartment. Get a job that is not propped up by my real estate. When you have done those things, call me. We will start over." He left. 6 months passed. Marcus and Vanessa moved into a 2-bedroom rental in Englewood. Vanessa filed for divorce in the 4th month. I did not celebrate. I also did not weep. Marcus began working as a regional sales manager for a commercial printing company, a job he found on his own, and for the first time in his adult life, he had a paycheck that was entirely his. Cordelia's foundation dissolved in April. Ethan moved in with Marcus 3 days a week, per a custody arrangement. My visitation petition was granted in its entirety. I see my grandson every Saturday. We have used the telescope 14 times. He has seen Saturn's rings. He has seen the craters of the moon. He has seen Jupiter and 4 of its moons lined up like a string of pearls. Last Saturday, he asked me if Grandpa Charles was up there somewhere. I told him yes. I told him Grandpa was in every star he had not yet found. Marcus and I have dinner once a week now. We do not talk about Vanessa. We do not talk about the house, which I sold in August for $4.1 million to a lovely young doctor and her husband who have twin girls. We talk about Ethan. We talk about his job. Last month, he told me he was proud of the work he was doing. I told him I was proud of him. It was the first time in 20 years that sentence was true on both sides. He apologized 3 weeks ago, a real apology. Not the kind you give when you want something, the kind you give when you have finally understood what you did. He wrote it by hand, on a piece of paper, and slid it across the dinner table. I read it. I folded it. I put it in my purse. I told him I forgave him, because I did, and because a mother's forgiveness, when it is real, is not the same as forgetting, and he knows that now. I am 70 years old. I live alone, in a beautiful condo, with a view of the mountains that Charles and I used to hike. I see my grandson every week. I have a son who calls me on Sunday mornings just to hear my voice. I have a quiet dignity that no one can take from me again. Because I have learned, finally, in the 11th hour of my life, that love without respect is not love at all. It is only dependence wearing love's dress. If you are a mother or a grandmother or any woman who has ever been made small in a room full of people who owed you everything, I want you to hear this. Your kindness is not a weakness. Your patience is not a permission slip. And the hand that feeds is not required to keep feeding the mouth that bites. Stand up. Walk out. And when the phone starts ringing, let it ring. Some calls are better left unanswered, and some lessons can only be taught by the silence on the other end of the line.